Hi, I'm Matt Buchman, and thank you for joining me for 5 insider factoids based on questions from readers. And today we're going to talk about Eye on the Dawn, Night Stalkers #2. Warning, this may include spoilers. So the premise I had for coming up with this book was I wanted to put together the high and the low. Um, Archibald Stevens III is Emily Beale, the heroine of the series. Um, He's her co-pilot. He's her friend. He's a beta, so he's perfectly glad being #2 because he just likes flying beside her. Never been anything romantic between them. It's all been on the job. And we meet Key Smith, and she comes in as the brash, sexy gunner from the streets of LA and the bad streets of LA in East LA. And she has a lot of authority issues, a lot of hierarchy issues, and we'll talk about how their relationship unfolds. But I wanted to put those two together, and I thought, okay, that's kind of the structure I'm going to play with for this book, for this couple. And then along came this third character. They very early in the book they rescue a war orphan named Delia, and she's they find her out in the middle of the Hindu Kush Mountains, which like make the remote Rockies look like a cakewalk. I mean, they're horrid to get through. And she's out there starving and freezing to death. And they rescue her, and she sets a parallel, new level. So you've got high and then the low and then Dilia. So it was really fun to play with that. And that was one of the things I really brought to this. Delia was the accidental character. They rescued her because um, they needed to, I needed something to humanize Key. She was too tough and harsh. And so she sweeps up this kid that they find literally in the middle of a gun battle high in the Hindu Kush. And they swing the helicopter down, they sweep the kid up, throw them aboard, and take back off. And then she had served her purpose. She was the moment where the the two hero and heroine kind of like started to communicate and started to get along, and because of that. And so I proceeded to say, okay, Delia's done, let's write her out. She wouldn't leave. So Key goes through these things, turns her over to medical. Well, they're at a far forward secret operating base. Medical processes her and hands her back. And she's like, what about child services? And he goes, out here? No, this is your problem. And so then she tries to take her to a refugee camp and is horrified at the conditions that actually exist in a refugee camp. And she decides she can't leave Delia there. And so these cracks and bonds form and break. And Key keeps trying to break these bonds, which eventually becomes her trying to break the bonds with Archie. Each time she gets close to someone, it sets her off. And so and this was intentional. This was me trying to structure the story, um, to hook them together and break them apart at the same time. And then the other power of Delia was she was a third point of view. She could look in from the outside and create a different view of what was happening. And I love Delia's point of view. It's a very cool point of view. Next, I wanted to talk about the roles. I talked about them briefly in the prior video for The Night Is Mine, book #1 in this series. But it's the roles that women have to choose to get along in a male society. And thankfully, this is falling away in newer and newer generations. But absolutely in my generation and at least one after me, the women had to choose their persona to survive in the male world. And Emily Beale is the one who takes them on one. She is the one who's going to come straight ahead at any problem. She's going to be better than any man around her, and she's going to prove it. She's not going to be boastful or braggadocious. She's just so good. And that's why she became, um, when I started the series in 2006, women were not allowed in special operations. And her byline sort of became the woman who was so good they couldn't keep her out. So that was her chosen role. And I set up these first four books to be four of the women's roles. So Key Smith is the sexy one. She has a great body, and on the street, she got by using it and using its power to distract and or attract. And so her identity has gotten wrapped up in this. And uh, I also drew on somebody I knew who she's a very pretty woman who, when she hit her 50th birthday, she was convinced that her life was pretty much done because beauty had been her framework. It had been her reference for her past. And it was very, very hard for her to get past that. Well, I didn't want Key to end up in that trap in 25 or 30 years, but that's where she's starting this story from. So it was the growth of her expanding out of that and learning that she had value other than her physicality and her ability to shoot because she's an expert marksman. Um, and so she comes in as the role of the sexy one, but it doesn't play, partly because her commander, Emily Beale, is there on competence and she values only competence. She's female. She doesn't care about the game. And so Key is very adrift in who she is and what her role is and what her place is. And that's one of the fun themes to watch through the book as she evolves and figures out how to deal with that. The next role, which I'll talk about more in Wait Until Dark video, is the little sister. You play the girl next door. You play the one that everybody takes care of. And the last one, Lola LaRue, is the chaos demon embodied. So, and there are many more roles, but these were the four I chose for the four books. The next thing I did with this book was I wanted to play with the tropes. And, you know, tropes are the cliches of storytelling. Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, those are tropes. The romantic comedy is a whole trope of its own. The hard-bitten detective, those are tropes. So in romance, for this story to be true to trope, Archie would convince Key that um, her love is real and he would be the one who saves the day and wins her heart. And she does the final act that she does for love or admires. I wanted to throw all that out. I wanted to look at how are these two people together. And so I said, okay, let's be true to the character instead of true to the trope. So that's why Archie gives up on her halfway through the book or two-thirds of the way through the book. He gets to the point where he just can't deal with her defenses. She's pushing him away, and he finally says, screw it. I'm done with you. It's just, you're too much trouble, which of course sets her into her own tailspin. At the end, she's actually the one who has to save the day, not him. She couldn't do it alone, but she's the one who has to save the day, which is the male role. And so she's the alpha warrior. He's the beta support unit. But that act, the way I've set it up with her coming to the understanding of what love is by and between the two pilots who are trying to start a war, um, when she takes them out, it teaches her that love has depth, it has time, it lasts, because these guys are starting a war over a crime that had been perpetrated upon them years before and had caused the death of both of their wives. And so she's becomes transfixed by that photo of them in that last happy moment, the two couples, and realizes she's been pushing away something really potentially good. She's been pushing away family, she's been pushing away Archie, she's been pushing away Delia, the war orphan, and it's the transformative moment for her where she realizes her value isn't in her physicality. Her value is in her core, in her heart. Sorry if I just thumped the microphone. Um, and so to me, that was a really fascinating transition for her. And I'd like to talk for just a moment about a big plot element that's kind of in the background. I mean, they're at a secret base in Pakistan flying into the Afghanistan war. Uh, this is set in 2010 is when I wrote it, so it's at the height of the war. And but they end up with this special mission of trying to stop these two guys declaring war on something called the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And there are these, I'm always fascinated when I walk down a street and I think about what's actually going on around me. What are the layers of what's going on? I'm on a sidewalk. There's a road. Underneath is a drainage system, a sewer system, and a water supply system. And above me is electrical wires, phone wires, cable wires. There's all this infrastructure that's in place. And then there's the infrastructure that goes up and down the streets, the street maintenance guys, the electrician trucks, the garbage trucks, there's all of this infrastructure that we live in the center of and take for granted. Well, that continues way past the city level or the state level or the country level. There are these global spanning groups. The European Union represents about 6% of the population, about 20% of the global GDP. NAFTA, which is the agreement that's US, Mexico, Canada, is another 6% of the population and a little bit more of the GDP. Well, there's a lot of quiet ones that those of us in the West don't particularly know about or think about or haven't heard of unless you're paying a lot of attention or researching for a novel. And the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is actually 40% of the world's population. Russia, China, India, Iran, and they're combined into an organization that represents another 20%. So between these three organizations alone, we have 60% of the world's income and 52% of the world's population. So when these different groups start to push against each other and interact again with each other, a lot of really interesting things happen. And so I like to think about it's yet another layer, just like the water supply system running underneath the sidewalk I'm walking on. There's this overarching political, geopolitical thing going on that, and it isn't just East versus West. There's the African Union, the South America, I forget the name of the South American states, I think it's called, ASEAN, which is some of the Asia's Southeast Asian something. I don't remember the acronym at the moment, but I wanted to take the SCO, which I had never heard of till I was researching this, and open it up and see a little peek of what it is and where it came from. And I think that really adds something fascinating to the story of opening up that bit of geopolitics. And that actually set a tone for much of my writing since that time of what are those bigger dynamics? What are those geopolitical pushes and shoves that shape a lot of world politics and world policy, and how changes are coming in our direction that we may not understand without understanding all of those levels. And so in the background of my stories, I love going in and saying, okay, and here's a little peek of this piece of it. So I have a lot of fun with that. I hope you do too. Please come visit my website. There's books, there's newsletters. You can contact me directly if you have another question. There's also free bonus scenes, including for Eye on the Dawn. Um, Stories, recipes, maps. I tried to make it fun and useful. Again, you can contact me and say, hey, could you also post this? I'd love to. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Take care.